If you've been keeping up with the news, chances are you're feeling overwhelmed. From troubling headlines to rapid social change, making sense of it all can feel nearly impossible. This week's episode brings us back to basics as Fredrik and Leilani take the mic for a candid conversation with no guests, just two friends trying to navigate challenging times. The two share their personal reflections on current events, exploring how we might find connection and meaning when the world feels increasingly divided. They remind us why conversations like these matter, especially when we're struggling to understand our place in history. Listen in as Fredrik and Leilani talk about staying motivated and finding new ways to make meaningful change in complicated times. This is Pushback Talks.
I'm Fredrik Curtin, and I'm the filmmaker.
And I'm Leilani Farha, and I'm the advocate.
And this is Pushback Talks, and we are back today with the most special and distinguished guest you can ever imagine in the history of this podcast. The distinguished guest is...
Fredrik Curtin.
Leilani Farha. So...
We're flying solo.
We are flying solo, and we do it because we find out that we have so much to talk about. The world is rocking around, and we talk to friends. People are scared and shocked, and so
depressed.
Depressed. So our mission here is to try to give each other some comfort.
Yes.
And share some knowledge, and to keep podcasting. And dear listener, we need your help to spread the news about our podcast. And you do that by telling your friends and retweeting or sending it on in social media, but also to talk with your friends about it. And of course, also through this traditional rating and commenting, and of course, subscribing to the podcast. It helps a lot. Leilani.
It does help. And yeah, so Fredrik, I was interviewed by a fairly well-known journalist in Canada named Adrian Harewood. He's starting his own podcast. And to prepare for the interview with me, he went out and researched, read a lot of things that I've written, and then decided, oh, it looks like she does a podcast. Oh, with Fredrik Curtin from Push, the director of Push, which he'd seen. So he started listening to our podcast. And he said he thinks it's a gem, and that we need to get it out there more, that it's a fantastic podcast that really more people should be listening to. So I really felt heartened by that because I trust his opinion. He's, as I said, he's a journalist himself. He's been around the block. So we do need more support and more love. People can support us through patreon.com. Look up Pushback Talks and give us a little love and money.
And Adrian, if you listen, hi, I love that you think our podcast is a gem. So if you really want to support it, write a small note in your newspaper and tell people to listen, because then we can quote you, and because we need that kind of publicized love also. So
that's right.
So if you have friends who are doing like stories about podcasts, write about us. Well, that's the promotional part of our podcast, was it?
That's it.
And now we have to go to the real thing. I was out talking to a group of architects against climate change. It's a grouping that is globally existing also. And we talked about my film, Breaking Social, and we also talked a lot about what is happening on the planet right now. And of course, the feeling amongst many people is out of stress and depression and stuff. And on top of that, all this, the tariffs where people start to feel it on their bank accounts also. There is a lot of stress out there. And I think it's important to talk about the tariffs, but we shouldn't let them, they are not more important than what's happened on the other side of that coin, which is human rights under attack, also within the US of A. Also the attack on the universities, attack on freedom of speech. And I think that's kind of maybe the more important game changer than even that we are losing money on our pension retirement savings. The loss of democracy is really scary, isn't it, Leilani?
Yeah, and the it's not just freedom of speech, also freedom of assembly, which is really important. The ability of people who are like-minded to gather and demand a better world under siege. Not just that, even worse, right? I mean, we are in the midst of a genocide, and that is an assault on human life and culture and a way of being and a people's. And it's all just happening in real time. All of this, everything we've described, with impunity. Not just with impunity, with a kind of robustness, with a kind of vigor.
Yeah, I think you can in one way say that what is happening now under the Trump regime is everything that the US has been doing forever. Or the Europeans.
Exactly.
I mean, it's colonialism, it's genocide, it's attacking people of color, attacking the native people. I mean, it's all in a tradition, but it's suddenly blatantly honest and also blatantly evil in a scary way. And it's like they come out and say, yeah, we are evil and we like to be evil. Watch out, because it's very aggressive.
I think that's a really important point, Fredrik. There's continuity here. This is something that has existed for a long time. It's not a Biden-Trump divide.
No, of course not. No. But then when at this speech I made, I tried also to say that what we see now is also a backlash of the successes we've had, because there are a lot of movements that have had success. I mean, of course, we can say the abolition of slavery was a movement that has success. The feminist movement, the right to vote 100 years ago, but still, even now after Me Too, there's been a lot of success. The trans and gay movements have been successful and won acceptance. And now they're under attack. And of course, the native people and Black Lives Matter have been able to raise awareness in a new way. And now everything is under attack. So it's under attack also because of its success. I think that's important to see. They attack us because we've been successful. So we can also feel some kind of pride around that we actually achieved something that they are now attacking. So it's very much about finding a way to be less lonely. You know, we need to start to see each other and to support each other. And you remember, we always talk about this meeting we had at the Castro Cinema in San Francisco when we showed Push. This young lady who came up to me and said, "Fredrik, I feel less lonely now when I've seen your film." Because she could understand what had hit her wasn't her fault. It was actually systematic. It was a part of the system. And I think to understand that you're not lonely, it can give you strength. So I think that's also what we can do with this podcast.
Absolutely. And I certainly have been feeling that a lot for the last 18 months. I think I've always felt a little bit lonely in this work, of course, but I've always been able to find community. It's been a little harder in the last 18 months to find friends, and what I find is new friends as much as and maybe more than old friends. But it's so important, because otherwise it's completely overwhelming. I do myself stumble. I'm stumbling around. I guess I feel a little bit like I'm not settled. I believed that we had many successes, like you said, whether it's, we helped to defeat apartheid in South Africa, or,
It was an important win in many ways.
An important win.
And it's not only a win in the sense that a racist regime had to leave, also a win that a lot of people around the world, and that wasn't only like a left-wing movement. It was the churches. It was like it's like a global community saying, this is not right. Every human being every grown-up citizen had a right to vote. That's what we call democracy. And if you don't have it for all, it's there for no one. So South Africa was extremely important for the generations who grew up in the 70s and the 80s. And of course, it's now a new time in history, and we have new lessons out there. And of course, what is happening in Gaza and Palestine right now is a defining moment for a lot of young people to kind of, okay, this is the world we live in.
Yeah. I mean, my stumbling around is about the successes and what do they mean in the current context, and how do we evaluate those successes in light of what we now know? So, for example, it looks pretty easy right now to take away rights that we took for granted in the United States. If you had a green card was like the goal for so many migrants and refugees to the United States, right? The green card meant security. It meant the ability to work in that country, earn a living, and maybe, pursue that elusive dream. And now we know that the green card is meaningless in the context of the current Trump regime, and people can be disappeared regardless of their legal status in the country. And that's why I said I'm stumbling around, because I want to believe in the successes that we've achieved. Rights for trans, LGBTQ, the end of apartheid, equality, some kind of equality for women. I want to believe in all of that. I want to believe that we achieved that. But if it can all be taken away, in a snap, it makes me query the depth of those changes and the commitment to those changes.
That's a valuable thought. I think, that's what I'm trying to tell people when I'm out speaking, is that you have to win the battle. A battle is never won for good. You have to win. You have to win your rights again and again and again. And I think the feminist movements know that a lot. I mean, the fight for the woman's right to their body. I mean, Poland, for example, had the most liberal abortion rights in the 70s or 60s in Europe. Everybody went there to get an abortion, and suddenly they became the most anti-women country in Europe. I mean, so everything you can win and you can lose, and you can win and you can lose. And obviously, what is happening in the most now extreme things around the Trump regime is obviously a total backlash, where we have to fight again to win our rights. So, but of course, I also try to understand what's happening in the world by looking into the history. And as you know, I've been working in South Africa the last year, and I'm making a film that is very much about the trauma of colonialism and the trauma of apartheid that is living in people. How do you break that? And it's also like the traumas, the historical traumas live in people, but people can't even name it because it's so pushed back in the history. So in that case, I mean, I'm really interested in colonialism, and of course, when you see what happens in Palestine, you can see the pattern again. That is like, it's the old phase of colonialism. And you can also see the reaction of Europe and North America, including Canada, that human rights are important, but not for all. And that is, of course, very painful. And I feel like a liberal Swede who've been able to travel the world in the memory of our old Prime Minister Olof Palme, who was then regarded as a friend of the so-called Third World. And he tried to build like a non-aligned countries movement, Sweden, Mexico, and other countries together, India, to kind of stand for some kind of a third way between the East Bloc and the West. And I mean, so I could come out and I could be the friends of the oppressed people in some way. And I can now feel that going out again, I've nothing to be proud of. Because also my country is a part of the same kind of, but human rights are good in Ukraine, but not in Palestine. And of course, that's shameful. And I'm totally pro-Ukraine. I mean, I really have to. I don't want anybody to say that Ukraine has the fault of what's happening in Palestine. But it's. I think we need to talk about colonialism and we need to see that it still exists. I thought we had in some way all agreed on that it was wrong, but it's still out there.
Yeah, most certainly is still out there. And I mean, I think part of what happened is we saw new forms of colonialism. I mean, certainly Push the Film, we, talked about financialization as a new form of colonialism. What is so striking about what's happening in Palestine and in Gaza in particular is it's like an old form of colonialism with all of its brutality. I mean, has been defined as a genocide by all of the leading human rights organizations and UN folks, et cetera, and plausible genocide by the International Court of Justice. So, I mean, it's that revert to complete brutality that I think is also just shocking with impunity. Let's be clear. It's the support for it, not just impunity. There's actual support for this, this reversion, and I mean, I think what we're talking about is so complicated because on the one hand, I think you and I both agree there's a continuity. This is kind of just a continuity of history. And yet at the same time, it does feel like a backlash. I think that, and I've been reading this book, now very famous book by Omar El-Akkad, who is Egyptian, lived in Canada for many years, now lives in the States, is a journalist, well-received journalist, and also an author of fiction and an award-winning author of fiction. And he's written a book, the short title of which is One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This. Referring very much to the genocide in Palestine. And I mean, what he queries is this idea of like, how much progress have we actually made? Is Western liberalism, has it always been hollow, morally bankrupt? And I really feel that, as I said, I feel I'm in a dark room to feel my way around this and to understand, like, how is it possible that all these people can get rights, but at the same time, this particular group of people can be denied rights, Palestinians. And I mean, there are other groups of people also being denied rights, the Sudanese, the Congolese, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a long list.
Yeah, you can see the Lakota Indians in the U.S. and now Greenpeace getting sued big time. Yeah. I mean, you can see all these patterns everywhere that attack on people. But of course, what happens in Gaza is
exceptional. Yeah.
Exceptional. Yeah. I'm also reading a book. It's called The World After Gaza by Pankaj Mishra. He's an Indian writer but lived partly in London. But I was curious because I like to see the perspective from outside Europe, US, North America on the days we're living, because sometimes we get too stuck in our own way of looking at things. And I think overall you can see in Europe that the support for Palestine has been stronger in Ireland, for example. A country with a colonial experience. Yeah. Colonial experience means something, has value, because you know how it impacted your society. And of course, India has a colonial experience. So it's really interesting. And he goes, because he started up as an admirer of Israel, he had an image in his bedroom of Moshe Dayan, the old defense minister of Israel. So he was always an admirer, and I think many people have been. My younger brother went to Israel to work in a kibbutz, my ex-wife also went to kibbutz to work. A lot of people have been doing that. Out of some kind of admiration for Israel. But most of them come back with a different view. And all these people did. And also Pankaj Mishra came back when he visited Israel and the occupied territory for the first time. He came back with, this is not so good. So he walks through the history, and he ends up in what he calls the color line, which I think is also an interesting expression of human rights are important, but maybe not for people with a different skin color.
Interesting.
And if we land there, which is so obvious now with the Trump regime, that they really hit hard against people with a different color of skin.
Yeah.
And they can throw them in prison, they can kick them out of the country, they can sell them to El Salvador, without even sentencing them, and they might be locked up there forever, You know, it's like it's so horrific, and it's also this kind of totally non-respect of human lives. They don't really care if they destroy people's lives and families' lives, and all the sorrow they plant in society forever, and all the trauma. And I think it shakes me, and you know, it's so horrible, and every individual in this, it's horrible.
It's horrible. The that trauma, I think it's very interesting that you're exploring that in your next film, Fredrik, and I look forward to seeing that, and I think that will resonate with so many people. I think people around the world have been traumatized by what's happening in Palestine, and then every single survivor in Palestine at the moment is more than traumatized. I'm not even sure. People keep saying we don't have the language. Doctors who emerge from Gaza and speak to the media say that they don't have language to describe both what's happened to people who have not survived the butchery, but also for those who are, in quotes, survivors. And this is something that we all in the West will have to reckon with for some time, if we allow ourselves to. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, Fredrik, is that you raised is like, what is the status of human rights law? And I mean, you know, my entire career has been based on international human rights law and a belief in it. I was a human rights mechanism for 6 years within the UN system when I was the special rapporteur. And where I've landed is when I was special rapporteur, for example, I knew that the system was flawed. I knew that the system was weak, that human rights law wasn't being applied to everyone equally. I could see all of that. Now I feel differently. Now I wonder if the system is working as it was intended, which is what I think your author is getting at, that there is this color line and that the system was always designed to maybe allow a little few human rights protections for a few brown people, but not too many brown people, and certainly not those brown people. And I'm, you know, pointing at Palestinians, and that it was really designed to consolidate the power of the West and to create what is now maybe a facade of democracy and human rights ideals, et cetera, that the West is promoting, you know?
Yeah, let me stop you for a while, because I totally hear what you're saying, of course. But for a long time, the UN was something that everybody respected, you know, at least in the official language everywhere. And of course, it's always been a battleground, and the Security Council hardly never really worked because there was always this kind of the veto nations. But there was a big respect. I think right now, the General Secretary of the UN he's almost like a communist, you know. He's a super radical, you know, because he's saying that, I mean, the Pope is a super radical right now, you know. So it's there is a big shift where the line is drawn much further, like to the right, if you want that kind of description. I don't know if that's the way to put it. So I think that's the new thing. That's even the flaw system is now being pointed out as like some lefty woke thing, you know. So the UN is woke. Even the UN you worked for is woke. But on the other hand, that means again that I'm trying to be on a positive note, that it's we're a lot of people on the woke side, you know. Even if they are at command now, they feel that they feel totally free to do whatever they want. Like Trump, you know, I want Canada, I want Greenland, I want the Panama Canal. I want to destroy 1 million lives of immigrants in the US. I want to, you know, he's basically blaming Ukraine for the invasion of its own country. You know, it's like, and of course he wants to build a riverfront estate in Gaza. I mean, it's totally vulgar, and he is some way the agenda is still his, which is of course extremely frustrating. But we are a lot of us who are not a part of his agenda. You know, I mean, even if Europe is flawed and weak, even if Canada is flawed and weak, you know, but still, come on, there is a possibility of some kind of resistance. I think it's coming up.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's part of the me feeling in the dark because there are so many people coming out. Not always the people I expect. In my own sector, I don't see people speaking out as much as I would like. But there are many, many others, everyday people walking through this world this new world that's been revealed, or this old world that's been revealed, in shock, in horror, not accepting the values that are being pushed on us, right? And I want to be clear, Fredrik, while I think the international system may have been flawed from the outset, I still believe in human rights. I mean, the right to housing. I know that would make people's lives better if that was realized, if people enjoyed the right to housing. I know that free expression is really important. So the rights, I think, were correct, but I think the system and how, and when you think of when the system was formed, okay, it's in the heels of World War II. It was to correct the moral vacuum that was exposed during World War II, in particular the Holocaust. It was done at the expense of Palestinians, right? So there was the 1948 Nakba, which displaced 750,000 Palestinians from their homes to create the state of Israel. That was all part of the creation of the international order. So that's why Palestine has become this litmus test in so many ways. But for me, it's not the rights. The rights are not wrong. That's a nice one. The rights are not wrong. I believe in those human rights. I do not believe in the governments that are trampling on them, the governments that are turning their back on them, right? I think, as I said in another interview, it's like a lot of men behaving badly, very badly. Don't blame the rights.
The rights are not wrong.
The rights are not wrong.
I mean, I'm back to Pankaj Mishra. He states some really harsh things. He means that Gaza now is replacing Auschwitz as a symbol of the final breakdown of the moral in the Western democracies. Very strong words,
Very.
Gaza replacing Auschwitz. But he also says that this is the shadow of colonialism, and that Nazism in some way was an extension of colonialism. So it was basically Hitler kept doing what the Western nations has been doing in Africa and Latin America and Asia forever. But now, for the first time, he did it against other Europeans, the genocide of Jews. I think it's a tough understanding, but there is probably a lot of points to it. The international human rights law that you're the expert on is also part of the results of the genocide of Jews. It's also that this should never happen again. That's been the message to the world. Let it never happen again. And genocides have been happening again. Massacres, the killing of people. And all the time killing of the weakest, and if they are in the way of some kind of exploitation of the nature and so on the planet. So it's there day by day in many ways. I see what you mean, the relation in 1948 with Palestine and the Declaration of Human Rights. And that's a painful point for the international system. And it's especially painful for the US and for Germany. And what he also explains that Germany in some way became forgiven very quickly because Germany was also needed in the new world.
Right. Interesting.
And needed in this kind of building up Israel.
And now look at the role Germany is playing with the genocide in Gaza. It's remarkable.
But it's also that Israel is a part of a military strategy from the West that is also the UK is a big part of. But he also tells the stories about how the Jews were treated also after the war. There were big camps on Cyprus. The British kept a lot of Jews in detention for like 3-4 years more. And, there's a lot of...
Wow.
And then nobody really cared about the Jews after the war.
Right.
Until Israel became something that was a new project. Yeah, we need to study this better to understand where we are at.
Well, it's very interesting, this idea too, and a lot of progressive Jewish people are saying this, that none of this is about protecting Jewish people, that it is very much about the military site, the geopolitical strategic interests of the state of Israel, and that it has nothing to do with protecting against anti-Semitism, nothing to do with protecting Jewish people generally. And I think that's such a strong message. Like, where are we? What is this really about? And that
it's also, I mean, he also writes about how Jews after the World War were not really so much pro-Israel, but then for a long time to be a Jew was also to be pro-Israel. In the end, it became the definition of being a Jew.
Yeah.
And of course that's been very complicated. But I also know one of the best Swedish writer, Göran Rosenberg, wrote, it's actually his work is coming out in English now. It's amazing. So he is Swedish Jew, but he's also lived a long time in Israel, and he is one of the best writers about what is going on. And he is, of course, extremely critical. He also reviewed Pankaj Mishra's book here in Sweden. So, I mean, we know there's a lot of, it's not about Jews, it's not about anti-Semitism. It's about something much bigger and of course, also more complicated. Mm-hmm. How do we bring all this back, Leilani? Because we are just two people. We're trying to understand, and we try to stay human, in the midst of this. But of course, I have a sense that things are turning around now. More and more people come out at a very, very late point, for sure, an extremely late point. People come out and say, what is happening in Gaza is wrong. And as you quoted your writer, at one point in history, everybody would say that it was wrong. Mm-hmm. But I have a sense that it's turning around. Of course, it will not be led by people in your neighbor country, or the government in your neighbor country. But it's happening around the world. And of course, in countries with a colonial experience, it will come faster.
I have seen some movement as well. We started at the top talking about people being really worried about tariffs. And I mean, of course, that's all part of the way in which Western democracies have been structured as well, where we care more about the bottom line and dollars and cents than we do about human lives. And certainly
and
where
the planet.
And the planet, 100%, exactly. I have started to see a conflation in the United States, these big protests against the behavior of the government, gutting getting rid of an education ministry, gutting USAID, their development arm. These big protests are starting to merge with the anti-genocide protests. And for me, that's an interesting thing because it means that they're starting to understand the evil of their government writ large, that there is a connection between Trump's tariffs, Trump's gutting of the American governmental system, and Trump's attitude toward Gaza and Israel. And those connections they're difficult for people to make in their everyday lives. We're all struggling just to get through every day. But I'm seeing those connections, they're starting to be made. And that's very, very important, I think, if we're going to land in a good place.
I mean, the first people out was in defense of Palestine was the Afro-Americans. I mean, so there is a clear connection between Black Lives Matter and the defense of the rights for the Palestinians. Because, I mean, the experience is there, and then you can see the color line very clearly. And I can see also in the protests here in Sweden, in my town, there's a lot of Gaza protests every week. And it's a lot of immigrants around Latin Americans, people from different countries active in this because they can feel that this is the same monster, moving again. Yeah. So I think that's really cool. Another thing I saw, you talked about that we should bring in the global south. I saw that the French economist Thomas Piketty, he wrote today in Le Monde that he thinks that we should invite the South to IMF, Brazil, South Africa and others, and leave the US out,
Yes. Absolutely.
So it's, and I mean, I don't know if, but I think the thoughts are interesting.
I think so too. A new world order.
That Trump has, he's blatantly honest in, I want everything, I want to win, and I want you to lose. You know, his language is so clear cut.
Yeah.
Okay, you want us to lose. Okay, we don't want to lose. So then you have to. I mean, it becomes like little bit of a fight. And I think both you can feel that in Canada, we can feel it in Europe, and certainly you can feel it if you're in South America or Africa or Asia. You can feel that, why should we be the losers? Better you be the loser.
Yeah.
You know, it's a horrible kind of game, because I also believe in, not that global trade should be done as it always been. Of course, we still need to respect both the planet and human rights, which hasn't been a part of this liberal project. But still, I mean, I think there is this kind of redefinition of things can be good for us. Mm-hmm. And in that, there is some little hope in that.
Possibility.
A possibility.
Possibility.
Are you a possibilist?
Yes, I'm a possibilist rather than hopeful. I'm just always looking for what's the possibility for change. And I do think these new sort of groupings and networks of countries from the global south are emerging. There is a group of nations that have come together. South Africa is one. I can't remember the group, but they've taken a very strong stance on Palestine and against Israel, Israel's actions in Gaza in particular. So like these things are emerging. There's the BRICS, of course, Brazil, India.
It's complicated because it also includes Russia and
Yes.
China. So it's, I mean,
it is complicated, but
it's complicated because it's not, if you talk about human rights, it's not left or right, because the so-called left, if you can even regard China or Russia as left, I think that's totally ridiculous, because they are, fascist regimes, especially Russia. But human rights is not so high up on their agenda.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. A complicated world, isn't it? Sheesh.
It is. But it's also populated with a lot of good people. And I think if the good people start to talk to each other, see each other, and support each other, and maybe not always define people as not good enough or not correct enough, I think we have to be a little bit more careful, because sometimes there's a risk that the left has a tendency of doing is say, because you say this, you're totally wrong. You're same as them, Yeah. I think we should be a little bit more, hold back the worst aggressions and to try to see...
a little more generous. I think that's right.
I think that's, from my point of view, that's really important.
Yeah. Now, if only I could travel to the United States to meet my friends and colleagues.
Yeah, I actually thought about you when I read about this French academic attending a space convention in Houston, and he got stopped at the Houston airport, and they checked his phone, and they found out that he'd been retweeting something about the attack on the academic world in the US, and he got arrested. First accused of terrorism or something like that, something really stupid, but they arrested him. And in the end, he got sent out of the country, and probably he can never go back. Yeah. So this means, then I thought about you, Leilani. So do you think you can go to the US?
Absolutely not. There have been, the government of Canada itself has an advisory out, travel advisory, saying expect to be delayed or expect detention, and that you'll undergo, very aggressive, or they don't use that word, but screening. So that's the government itself is saying that. And then the big national Muslim organization in Canada has issued a warning to anyone with an Arab last name, or who is Arab or Muslim, who has ties to the Middle East, and who is, of course, anti-genocide and vocal on social media, to just simply not travel to the United States. So I will take that under advisement. I'm certainly not going to travel there.
I mean, this is, again, not the first time I remember this was maybe 10, 15 years ago, the Swedish national team of football were flying to play a friendly game in Mexico. And they had to go through Houston, I think, or Atlanta maybe. Well, whatever, doesn't matter. And one of the guy was born in Tehran, Iran. It was in his passport, in his Swedish passport.
Yes.
So he was coming with a whole national team, and he got held back.
Wow.
For like 24 hours.
Was this like after 9/11?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean,
Wow.
it's the name, your surname and your birthplace has for a long time been an issue in the U.S.
Yes, but now heightened for sure.
It's not getting better, and of course, I don't think. I mean, I love a lot of things about the U.S. A lot of nice people out there, and so on. So I mean, I would like to go.
I actually am shocked that probably for 4 years, I would not be able to go. I mean, I live a few hours from the United States. I drive. It's like not even 2 hours to the United States from where I live. I have a sister who lives in Washington. It's remarkable to me. And it is a topographically beautiful country. There are parts of it. I love the Southwest United States and the beautiful desert mountains. That's my happy place, as they say. No, I find it actually kind of devastating.
Yeah. So that was like a sad ending of our of this episode
We'll
of the
find
podcast.
our people elsewhere.
But friends in the US, because we have a huge audience in the US.
Yeah.
Please write to us and let's support each other and let's keep talking about important stuff. You find us on social media, my name or Leilani or Push the Film. We also now have a Pushback Talks on Blue Sky.
Blue Sky, yeah.
So you can find us. So let's keep talking and let's be friends with friends and take on the bastards.
A perfect ending. Let's take on the bastards with our friends.
And the rights are always right.
Thanks, Fredrik.
Thanks, Leilani. See you soon.
Pushback Talks is produced by WG Film. To support the podcast, become a patron by going to patreon.com/pushbacktalks. Follow us on social media at make_the_shift and push_the_film. Or check out our websites, maketheshift.org, pushthefilm.com, or breakingsocialfilm.com.